From danceable electronic music to the actual sound of suffering in music made specifically to be dangerous, niche musical subcultures are a fascinating place to explore. Niche music genres are collections of music made by artists that fit specific conventions of tropes, either by being released around the same time or featuring similar visual or musical styles. Today, we are making our way down an iceberg of niche music to discover how far humans can take simple sounds. Tiers are arbitrary, and constructive criticism is always welcome. Level 1. Surface Curiosities. To rank here, an average but well-informed person would know this niche genre and what it is without researching it on the internet beforehand. House music is one of the most popular electronic music genres, featuring a 4/4 beat and dance-ready tempo. Pioneered in the early 80s, it is named after one of the first clubs where it was played, the Warehouse, and the fact that it could have been easily produced using home instruments and sampled records. It has had a tremendous influence on modern popular music. Named after the slang term for where drugs are sold illegally, trap music mirrors working-class Atlanta's metropolitan atmosphere with minimalistic beats. Focusing on snare drums, it has recently crossed over into the mainstream, encouraging a shift to electronic music that leaves the instrumentation of traditional rock behind. Lo-fi was originally associated with DIY production and recording, which gave it a distinctly distorted sound. It is now associated with down-tempo instrumental hip-hop music to aid study, focus, and relaxation. And its original iterations have been replaced by bedroom pop as a genre tag, while remaining descriptive of production quality. Bedroom pop is the name we use to describe the music written, recorded, engineered, and distributed by musicians within the comforts of their homes. The resulting sound was arguably warmer and more intimate, and the perfect successor to Chillwave. A movement that never really existed and explored in a previous video, Chillwave was a joke term invented by a satirical music blog to ironize the way that music critics baptize genres. While the musicians associated with it had little in common, it can be said that their sampling techniques and fascination with the 1980s went on to influence modern crossover electronic music, which we call future bass. Modern electronic dance music, EDM, has sought to give a more digestible appeal to harsh drops, with warmer bounces and bass lines made up of detuned synths. It is an evolution, and in many ways a watering down, of dubstep. Brilliantly explored by Timbo & Toast's recent video, dubstep is an electronic music genre that is characterized by a loud gulping, syncopated rhythm, and sub-bass frequencies. Originally developed in the UK, it was popularized by American producer Skrillex, who intensified the sound with robotic fluctuations and aggression that became the popular brostep. Yacht rock is a descriptor given to soft rock music released in the mid-70s to early 80s, characterized by its similarities to smooth jazz and R&B. The genre was rebaptized as a result of the popularity of the 2005 web series Yacht Rock, which chronicled the lifestyle of soft rock musicians and associated it with the practice of sailing. But now it's time we explore a deeper abyss. Level 2. Interesting Tidbits. This level requires most listeners to research the meaning of the genre, unless they are interested in their respective musical niche. The music itself doesn't sound too out of the ordinary, however. Inspired by synth music and pop culture from the 1980s, synthwave is often instrumental and has a futuristic theme, with large, throbbing retro synths and house-influenced side-chained heavy drums. It draws inspiration from a variety of genres that originated in the 80s, including synthpop, electro-disco, and other derivative styles. Outrun is accepted as the visual aid of synthwave, all about the fast-paced, racing-themed music influenced by the old Outrun video game from 1986. And Ryan Gosling in the film Drive. Hyperpop is a recent newer genre that blends the stylings of EDM music with ultra-pop song structures. It was named after the Spotify playlist that popularized it. Sounds are more unconventional and metallic, with manipulated vocals and distorted synths that play on a campy synthetic aesthetic reminiscent of Bitpop and chiptune. Defined differently but oftentimes overlapping, Bitpop and chiptune are newer takes on digital bit music, fusing it with modern, catchier production and faster tempos. 8-bit sounds are sampled and featured, paired with vintage computer or video game console chip sounds, integrating worlds previously explored in sound collages more organically. Similarly to sound collage, plunderphonics involves utilizing and manipulating one or more pre-existing audio sources to create a new composition, resulting in new works with complex layers of sounds and seemingly unlimited sonic potential. Tom Sawyer, the Dicklick Brigade, and the Haha Music Club have emerged as some of the most bizarre iterations of the genre. A 90s live iteration of plunderphonic mixing, turntablism is the manipulation of sounds to create new music and effects using turntables or crossfade DJ mixers. The music also features recording quirks, like record scratches and offbeat tempos that became the basis for hip-hop music production. Originally a fusion of dubstep and hip-hop, wonky is defined by off-kilter unstable rhythms that are supposed to reflect ketamine use and mirror how the drug may affect users attempting to dance while on it. Also known as Chillwave, cloud rap is characterized by a distinct form of relaxed, ethereal, dreamlike, and reverb-heavy production, with an emphasis on its electronic elements and psychedelic atmospheres, even when the bars are the most unconventional, like the ones of Viper. Hauntology is a loose genre that evokes a shared memory of the past, primarily centered in English Indian electronic artists, drawing inspiration from library music and public information films from the 1960s and 1970s. It is named after the Jacques Derrida concept of hauntology, whereby elements from the past return or persist in the form of ghosts. Shibuya-style music, Shibuya-kei, was named after a busy district of Tokyo, and it was known as Japanese retail music, inspired by swinging 1960s pop with a fashionable throwback to Western retro and kitsch culture, particularly that of lounge and exotic bossa nova music, and somewhat related to city pop. Years earlier, 1970s Japan was exploring the boom of city pop, an Eastern take on soft rock that tinged its sound with waves of smooth jazz, by virtue of its relation with the everyday urban and luxury life of Japanese metropolitan areas. Meanwhile, in the Western Hemisphere, high energy became one of the first up-tempo disco movements to feature electronic music, which sparked the development of house music and IDM. Intelligent dance music, IDM, or brain dance, was popularized in the 90s by Aphex Twin and his contemporaries, which brought dance music beyond the clubs and more into the realm of home listening, although the label was somewhat seen as elitist. IDM tended to rely upon individualistic experimentation rather than adhering to characteristics associated with specific genres, drawing from techno and rave music. Vaporwave is a sample-based genre characterized by heavily synthesized and processed manipulation of corporate mood music. The name itself is a spin on the 1980s term vaporware, a software or hardware project that fails to be released to the public. The sound results in a sacred, mystical, sultry, dreamy, hyperreal, and/or crystal-clear caricature of mass media from the late 1980s. It seems to have outlived sister microgenres like Witch House. Witch House is a dark, occult-themed electronic music microgenre and visual aesthetic that emerged in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Altered and slowed-down samples, both vocal and melodic, are frequently employed in combination with drum machine beats, less otherworldly than ethereal wave. Ethereal wave is characterized by atmospheric guitar soundscapes and delicate female vocals that create an ethereal and surreal effect through echo and delay, which became popular in video game soundtracks. Video game music is any of the musical pieces or soundtracks found in video games. It has grown along with internet gaming culture, including a number of experimental or atmospheric composition techniques, from the nostalgia of Toby Fox's Undertale soundtrack to the ambient soundscapes of the LSD Dream emulator. Similarly, Vocaloid music is also made with the digital audience in mind. The app, a combination of Vocal and Android, uses synthesizing technology with especially recorded vocals of voice actors or singers. To create a song, the user must input the melody and lyrics. Vocaloid voice banks have become represented by anime avatars which have given them distinct identities and spun a new culture of unique music around them, like Denpa songs. A Denpa song is a type of Japanese music that is intentionally strange and catchy, with off-key vocals, nonsensical lyrics, and over-the-top tunes. The name Denpa describes individuals who often daydream and live their personal fantasies out in the world. Lost music is any music rumored to have existed in the past but has since been lost to time. It can be made popular by artists whose fans speculate exclusive material was never released, or of particular relevance by more obscure musicians. The Lost Music Wiki offers resources to research lost music lore. Level 3. Oddly specific. This level is comprised of subgenres of Tier 2, or a genre movement scene that has concluded, making the resulting music obscure unless knowingly extensively researched. It's mostly accessible music branded as something a little bit more bizarre. Artcore is an electronic music genre that mixes instrumental music with drum and bass and electro, popular in Japan. It's not an officially defined genre, but commonly used as a blanket term for unique fusion music of electronic and classical elements. Future funk is a sample-based modern disco vaporwave offshoot. It's more energetic, incorporating elements of house and synth funk, similar to vaporwave but with a cleaner sound, and an affinity for nostalgia, lo-fi distortion, and slowed-down samples. Reverb effects are still present, but the music is generally less ambient and more rhythmic, with more groove. Another spin on dance music, bubblegum bass takes pop music and amplifies its cuteness and femininity to extreme levels, often pitching the vocals upward and warping the rhythm through a frenzied UK bass and wonky filter. It has been popularized by the label PC Music, which is also used as a synonym for the genre. Progressive electronic music is music characterized by slick, delicate production that implements melodic synth pads and lush electronic layering made up of original compositions, aided by the prominent use of reverb, delay, and other effects. The genre's name was coined as a reference to its characteristic progressions, similar to those present in Deconstructed Club. Identified by aggressive, frantic sound design featuring metallic explosive percussion or samples, Deconstructed Club paints an excessive, apocalyptic-sounding soundscape with constant rhythmic switch-ups and atonality, recontextualizing club sounds from a variety of backgrounds and mimicking the transgression of electro-clash. This melting pot of styles came together to promote a raw, retro robotic music featuring images that were often highly sexualized, kinky, and consciously trashy. Electro-clash artists typically employed minimal throbbing beats and bass lines, budding synthesizer parts, vocoders, and often monotone, half-spoken, half-sung vocals. A genre of electronic dance music influenced by electro and French house music made by people all over the world. Distorted melodies, 8-bit sounds, sliced-up vocals, and pop structures were hallmarks of the sound. The name for this faux genre came from the fact that it was popularized in the early 2010s, when indie music was being mostly shared by blogs, like Chillwave, which we now know by a different name. This evolutionary genre was intended to refine the traditional sound of vaporwave, making room for a higher level of production that was characterized by a mix of chillwave's danceable nostalgia and beach feelings with hypnagogic pop lo-fi psychedelic landscapes and vaporwave style of production. Glo-fi was a perfect name to describe the complexly layered sound and sophisticated dance pop sensibility of this genre, almost as evocative as Night Bus. Nightbus isn't a genre of music. It's a combination of the scene and the feeling it evoked, popular from 2010 to 2012. It was named after Burial's song, Nightbus, with its beat-free, string-swept tingles that captured the poignancy of the afterglow, Burial's term for the relationship between music and rave culture. Late-night lo-fi takes the idea of sampling but presents it in a new light. It is more concerned with creating a sense of bright lights, big city nights, with a bluesy feel through 80s samples and smooth jazz to paint this picture. It is slower, more muddled and raw, without original drum samples, an idea taken even further by Mallsoft. Mallsoft blends vaporwave with background or elevator music samples of easy listening, bossa nova, smooth jazz, and sometimes even ambient music. It attempts to mimic the ambiance and reverberation of large crowded malls with huge specs and hazy dreamlike atmospheres. It is meant to be left on repeat while doing other things, forcing its way into our minds subconsciously, to be recalled later as a real or false memory. Popularized by the SoundCloud rap scene, Hexed is characterized by heavily bit-crushed, sped-up and pitched-up vocals. With additional sound effects like delay and heavy reverberation, the genre aims to encapsulate a dreamy, murky, surreal atmosphere, sometimes used to create a sense of nostalgia, though many artists may instead focus on futuristic, near-mechanic ambience, akin to that of Future Visions. Future Visions takes the concept of the futuristic world of vaporwave and brings it to life, sonically recreating the world itself rather than alluding to it. It is one of the most cinematic forms of vaporwave, relying on much more ambient textures than the other subgenres, creating very synth-heavy and dreamy soundscapes. An offshoot from late-night lo-fi, VHS pop has grown into one of the most created vaporwave subgenres. It takes 80s pop and smooth jazz music and gives it a lo-fi VHS-style effect, but usually with a more upbeat treatment. There is a recognizable hint of tropicalism that persists in the sound of this genre. Vapor trap incorporates a blend of trap percussion and hip-hop music that makes use of vaporwave imagery and musical textures, and often samples from old computer software. It is more inventive and experimental than typical trap or hip-hop music, using the influence of vaporwave's aesthetic, with 1990s cyberculture and technology remaining an important aspect of the genre. Another vaporwave offshoot, also known as music core, Utopian virtual music generally uses music to create the sense of a retrofuturistic utopia without vaporwave's sinister, full utopian undertone. Sea-punk was a music and visual art genre that utilized imagery from the 2000s cyberpunk culture, including dolphins, pyramids, bright colors, beach scenes, and dreamscapes. Music often incorporated oceanic sounds and electronic beats, but it was not necessarily tied to the aesthetics of the subculture. Dreamwave was a term used to describe the more tranquil synthwave with slower tempos and cinematic soundtracks. Dreamwave uses hazy atmospheres and textures that are made more accessible through pop song structures and the addition of vocals. Simpson Wave constituted a genre of YouTube videos that collage classic Simpsons moments with vaporwave tracks. The clips from The Simpsons were often heavily edited, given a codeine purple filter, staticky VHS feel, and generally arranged with psychedelia in mind, but the music itself was still general vaporwave. A derisive term critical of the music, meme wave producers took multiple aesthetic styles with no contextual reason and mixed them to present a nonsensical mixture. This is another subgenre referred to as broperwave because of its mindless nature. Pizza Wave, despite its name, was named by independent vaporwave producer PZA, who coined it as his term for his particular style of vaporwave music. PZA was the object of controversy when he was caught trying to pass off as his own the music of other artists, despite that being the ultimate irony of vaporwave. Internet core is quirky electronic music that features abrupt, uncanny atmospheres and attempts to recreate the feeling of incongruent liminal spaces in the auditory form. Also known as weirdcore, the genre is still in its early days and is subject to frequent evolution. Weirdcore and internet core mixes are very popular on YouTube and may be the object of a future video on this channel. Bardcore, medieval wave, or tavern wave is an internet phenomenon that became popular in 2020, consisting of medieval-inspired remakes of hit pop and rock songs. Binaural recording is a method of recording sound that uses two microphones arranged with the intent to create a 3D stereo sound sensation for the listener of actually being in the room with the performers or instruments. It is used to help sleep. Translating into Finnish sound, Suomi sound or Spangadelic is a style of psychedelic trance that originated in Finland around the mid-1990s. Also known as future pop, Psychopop is a niche style of pop music that originated in the early 2000s as part of the Neo-Shibuya Kei, second wave of Shibuya Kei movement, which introduced more prominent bleepy electronic elements and faster tempos in a more distinctly cute, childlike, or cartoonish aesthetic to the music and album artwork. Squee is a musical style that combines simple synth chiptune leads and bass lines with funk, R&B, or soul-like rhythms, overall rendering a stripped-down, funky sound. The name refers to the use of analog synthesizers in the production process, where the aim is to squeeze out the more interesting sounds possible. Level 4. Acquired tastes. This level introduces potentially experimental techniques into recording. Usually, the music in this tier is not covered by big mainstream magazines and only divulged in specific communities by popular artists within the niche. Dream punk came in use in 2015 due to the UK-based label Dream Catalog using it to describe the surreal, dreamlike quality of their releases. Imagery conveys the sights and sounds of a vague, unfamiliar future world with its many moods and atmospheres. It is an offshoot of vaporwave that features heavily layered tracks that are often longer, obscured under ping-ponging sampling and more reverb, which gives it its characteristic slush sound that names the microgenre. Churchwave applies vaporwave's critique of late capitalist hyperconsumerism to a contemporary church dominated by consumerism and the practice of equating people's emotions with the will of God. It uses sermons and preaching samples along with vaporwave production. Sega Haze is another variant of vaporwave. It uses video game sampling or evocation of 19th gaming aesthetics as opposed to other sources. Hypnagogic Drift is an offshoot of vaporwave that is more dreamlike, creating weird hypnagogic atmospheres from strange samples, forming music that is quasi-ambient. It is mostly known for using strange and evocative imagery to emphasize the surrealism of the music, despite not being related to hypnagogic pop. Previously explored in another video on this channel, From Coachella to the Capitol, hypnagogic pop incorporates intentionally low-fidelity production and remnants of pop culture in various degrees of abstract filtering and reverbing in a free-form format, from cassette-side long jams to almost complete copies of pop tracks. Broken Transmission is one of the most creative vaporwave offshoots, using television commercials, radio jingles, and dialogue clips, and fusing them with music, chopping them up erratically to give a sense of a broken transmission that can be abrasive and at times disconcerting. Acid House was a rhythmic take on early house, with a sound shaped by repetitive bass lines from the synthesizer sequencer Roland TB303 using modulation of the filter cutoff frequency to produce the typical squelching sound that seems to glitch. Glitch itself is a style of electronic music that uses the sounds created by malfunctioning digital technology, like hardware noise, CD skipping, and digital distortion, as the main technique of composition. More accessible offshoots of the sound have merged it with pop and hip-hop music, straying it farther away from its bit music roots. Bit music is created by sound chips, cards, and sequencers found in video game consoles, personal computers, and arcade machines, without the pop song structures of chiptune and bit pop. Ocean grunge was a darker cousin of C-punk that used sampled, slowed-down filtered grunge music and mixed it to have a hollow and depressing sound, but with a deep ocean abyss motif. Much like C-punk, it has not withered the test of time, but has since been somewhat sonically reincarnated as Doomer Wave. Doomer Wave is a music movement popularized by slowed-down remixes of alternative rock songs with the Doomer meme accompanying it as a visual. The remix mixes are defined by their lower pitch, stretched length, record crackles, and high reverb to emphasize the stark sadness and depression. Nightcore is a microgenre that is based around the speeding up of already existing songs, increasing the beats per minute to be usually near 200. It is characterized by high-pitched vocals and a generally cutesy vocal, as its most popular source material was originally video game themes. Just as cheerful, but older, happy hardcore was a highly energetic form of electronic dance music developed during the late 1990s, characterized by an extremely fast-paced 4/4 beat, saccharine vocals, piano riffs, and spacey effects. EBM, or electronic body music, is a dance industrial style that is characterized by repetitive danceable rhythms and undistorted vocals. It's a more accessible version of experimental industrial music, like martial industrial. Martial industrial incorporates elements of traditional European military marches with dark ambient and industrial music. Typical compositions include military band instrumentation, synthesizers, drum machines, sequencers, and samplers. Dark ambient emphasizes an ominous, gloomy, and dissonant atmosphere through ambient's atmospheric convention, but it tends to be more eerie and unsettling. This dark and disturbing atmosphere can be evoked with the use of drone rumbles, machine noises, simple percussive instruments, distortion, and synthesizers. Catholic psychedelic synthfolk was highlighted as one of Mojo's top 10 weirdest music genres. The genre is a Catholic take on psychedelic and progressive music, with less rigid and more otherworldly soundscapes. Tribal ambient combines the atmosphere of ambient music with traditional instruments and sounds like percussion, with a distinctly hypnotic sound created by drums. Ritual ambient is a darker take, focusing on dark, deep, disturbing, ritualistic, and occult atmospheres with chanting voices, tribal rhythms, and appropriate samples. Experimental is an umbrella term for music that defies the conventions of its genres. Experimental artists range from jazz, rock, and art conventions, like The Residents, Frank Zappa, and Captain Beefheart, protagonists of the 1970s California freak scene, to ironic internet projects like Picky Picnic and Clowncore, and are easily confused with outsider music. Usually experimental musicians, outsiders are self-produced, often termed bad or inept by listeners who judge them by the standards of mainstream popular music. Features of these amateur recordings range from eccentric transgressions to avant-garde weirdness and DIY-style improv. Many outsiders may indulge in avant folk music, a type of contemporary folk that is more experimental and less confined to conventional song structures or styles, playing with instrumentations, rhythms, and other factors not commonly found in common folk music. The result is often uncanny, with organic natural instrumentation and intriguing dissonance, like that of Tim Buckley's album Lorca. Focused on creating bleak, faceless, mechanized atmospheres, industrial sounds were dark and brooding, often featuring images or sonic evocations of mechanical objects. The music was experimental in nature, featuring sounds and effects, and was typically performed in a performance art kind of live experience.
Doctor, stayed alive.
Dark synth artists incorporate atmospheric fast tempos into a heavier and darker style of synthwave music. Imagery embraces ultra-violent horror, action, and satanic icons from the 1980s, and artists are marketed similarly to metal acts, exhibiting equally loud and distorted production. Machina, also known as bacalao, was a local Spanish form of techno developed in the early 1990s, which was strongly influenced by new beat and EBM, but aimed at a lighter sound, more suitable for rave parties. A darker offshoot somewhat related to vaporwave, Death Dream features pounding drones and eerie loops of atmospheric loud instrumentation with a focus on isolation, depression, and desperation. It is, in many ways, vaporwave's answer to death metal. Similarly, dubstep's answer to death metal comes in the form of deathstep, instantly recognizable by distorted basses, hard-hitting kicks, screamed vocals, and pan snares. Coined by Brian Eno, generative electronic music uses modular synthesizers to create serene soundscapes. The music is ever different and changing because it is created by a system as opposed to a person. Level 5, for dedicated ears only. Genres in this tier are either loved or hated. They are mostly made, produced, and shared on Bandcamp or specific internet communities. Usually, they are disliked by average listeners until they are exposed to them or feel a significant affinity towards them. Drone is characterized by a focus on long sustained notes and tone clusters or repetitions of single notes. Unlike other genres that use drones as a component to establish tonality, drone music puts drones at the forefront, removing most melody and rhythm. The result is a stark, microtonal experience that can be extremely loud and at times jarring. Hard vapor is primarily defined by the fusion of elements of vaporwave music with elements of techno and IDM, as well as borrowing a large amount of influence from hardcore electronic and its subsequent subgenres. It is deliberately accompanied by Slavic dystopian aesthetics, like Cyrillic text, often concerning drug culture and cyberpunk themes. Black MIDI is an internet music microgenre consisting of compositions that use MIDI files to create a song or remix containing a large number of notes, typically in the thousands, millions, billions, or even trillions. People who make black MIDIs are known as blackers. Oftentimes, black MIDI can overlap with deep internet, which uses obscure YouTube videos and other internet media for its sample sources, often those with under 20 views and found via sites like PetitTube. Musically, it most often resembles sound collage, field recordings, and vaporwave, or a melange of all three. Named after its birthing record label, digital hardcore is a high-tempo fusion of hardcore punk and electronic, which combines harsh vocals and electronic guitars with synthesizers, samplers, and large drum machines. Spanning from hardcore and breakcore, lollycore uses complex chopped breakbeats with heavily distorted or high-pitched lowly vocals and extreme tempos. Mashcore is a related genre that doesn't feature the heavy focus on anime and childlike samples. Kuzoicore is a variation of lollycore that incorporates noise, mashcore, nightcore, and glitch elements. Cybergrind is the combination of grindcore, a fusion of hardcore punk and thrash metal, with the added electronic dimensions of computer-generated noises and drum machines. Generated sounds are created through the use of programmed synthesizers or MIDI files. A spicier take on hardcore, Sasscore took heavy influences from numerous sources outside hardcore such as dance punk and even disco, and fused this with influences from inside the scene. The genre was noted for its spastic edge, using angular and chaotic guitar parts, danceable rhythms, and synthesizers to create a manic and tumultuous sound. Speedcore is a subgenre of hardcore known notably for its exceedingly high rate of beats per minute and an aggressive electronic percussion track. Speedcore is often called splittercore when the beats per minute are between 600 and 1000. In the 90s, splittercore was sometimes referred to as nosebleed techno. Terrorcore features similarly fast beats but pairs them with samples from horror films. It is known as supertone when the BPM reaches 15,000 beats per minute and hypertone when it goes over 1.2 million. Nintendocore is a style of hardcore punk that fuses the heavy riffing and vocals with chiptune instrumentation, providing a nostalgic retro gaming aesthetic to the genre. Early electronic music was made in the 1950s and 60s, set apart by its intent, as it was created far before it was intended for mass consumption. The music was avant-garde and used breaking technology of the day, including some devices and instruments created by the artists themselves. Oscilloscopic music is music composed specifically for the oscilloscope device, an electronic test instrument that graphically displays varying signal voltages as a specific waveform. Sound poetry is poetry where emphasis is placed upon phonetics and the sounds of syllables rather than the meaning of the words themselves. Early electronic producers often accompanied experimental creations with sound poetry in order to explore linguistics in their work. Different kinds of static can be heard in order to induce states of relaxation. White noise refers to a type of sound that's in equal intensity across all frequencies audible by the human ear, sounding evenly distorted. In pink noise, each octave interval, halving or doubling in frequency, carries an equal amount of noise energy. It is deeper than white noise, with more bass and rumble. Brown noise has higher energy at lower frequencies. This makes it deeper than pink and white noise, like thunder, waterfall, and roaring. Cosmic noise, or galactic radio noise, is random noise that originates outside of the Earth's atmosphere. Black noise, also referred to as blackened noise, applies the aesthetic of noise to black metal with abrasive loudness and low production value, focusing on the quality of the noise rather than the musical composition of the track. Power noise combines looped noise samples and beats with various harsher styles of electronic music. Power noise is instrumental and based upon heavily distorted drum machines, abrasive synthesizers, and martial but danceable 4/4 beats. Level 6. The Abyss of Degeneration. Music in this tier is so obscure and inaccessible that most listeners will wonder if it is even something people like. Unironically, this goes without being said, but tread with caution. Flashcore is a genre that grew out of speedcore and industrial hardcore. While being originally related to speedcore, flashcore is defined by its complex avant-garde structures. Sorting algorithms are algorithms that put elements of a list in a certain order. When this exercise is performed with sound, any given two values being compared generate a single sound, which is then scaled onto the hertz range and can be soothing to watch in action. Lowercase is an extreme sound art form that bases its music on very quiet sounds, and often uses silence to juxtapose these sounds so as to amplify their intensity. Lowercase sound artists amplify microsounds to make audible lower frequency sounds unreachable to the human ear finally audible, like microscopic insects moving about and other natural phenomena. Microsound is the usage of sounds on an incredibly small scale lasting from 10 milliseconds to less than a tenth of a second. By arranging and manipulating these sounds digitally, complex patterns and compositions can be made in ways that aren't possible via solely acoustic means. Onkyo or Onkyo-kei is a form of Japanese experimental music that focuses on the exploration of the physical traits of sound rather than the music as a form of expression. Performances are stoic and minimal with the inclusion of large gaps of silence and no input feedback loops. Also known as chance or aleatoric music, indeterminacy classical compositions leave elements of composition, performance, or both completely up to chance. This might be using cards, dice, computer generators, mathematical formulas, the I Ching, or other methods to make their musical decisions. In fact, the word aleatory comes from the Latin word alea, meaning dice. Field recordings is a term denoting a set of practices regarding the recording of phenomena that occurs outside of the traditional musical setting. Releases in this field often have an external purpose to them and can involve the sound of anything from outdoor landscapes to geographical locations and even post-internet exercises, like the infamous streaming personal memory experience across torrent plane remembering jungle troll Gale conversation, the recording of a single video game stream with no commentary. Electroacoustic music is based on manipulation of acoustically played music with experimental electronics, like looping, feedback, layering, delay, static and noise, and backward sampling. Live performances involve the sound processing happening in real time with the musician playing and the other mixing live. Tape music composers capture raw, real-world sounds such as field recordings, recordings of musical instruments, or synthesized sounds on tape, which results in different performances each time the music is being played. As the name suggests, these are recordings which are done in order to capture the sounds produced by animals, like birds and whale songs. Vapor noise is a variant of vaporwave that utilizes aspects or elements of noise music. It can range from garbled sounds associated with vaporwave aesthetics to harsh noise compositions in the vein of vaporwave. It has been described by its pioneer, Adblock Plus, as the most aggressively terrible idea in music history. Harsh noise is noise music that seeks to take the genre to its natural limits, resulting in an aggressive wall of sound that audibly assaults the listener with its loudness and abrasion. If the noise doesn't have much in terms of dynamic changes, it is known as harsh noise wall. Plunder noise borrows harsh noise treatments in the context of plunderphonics compositions, orchestrating abrasive layers of sound. Power electronics is a style of music that focuses on heavy use of loud high-end and/or low-end frequencies and screamed vocals, using synthesizers and electronic equipment to create loud, screeching sounds alongside power tools and metal scraps like sheets and bars. Artists in this movement often focus on shocking imagery, evolving the sound in death industrial. Death industrial is a development of noise in industrial music that involved the creation of densely dark atmospheres, with noise-infused textures and production techniques, which incorporated elements of dark ambient by exchanging the abrasive attributes for more atmosphere-oriented productions. Some works of sound art and edgy industrial music have chosen to sample particularly disturbing music. Michael Chian's experimental music concrète pieces feature audio of him crying in distress. Gulag, a musical project previously known as Stalag, is a Dutch collective that features the loud screaming of the mentally ill in order to craft the sonic compositions. Gore noise is an extreme genre that fuses grindcore with brash noise music through heavy pitch shifting down, often to the point of sounding like gargling or bubbling, or to imitate vomiting and other bodily functions. Pathological gore noise in particular aims to imitate the body horror of Cronenberg, using medical terminology and imagery that rarely fails to induce disgust and shock. Danger music is an umbrella term for different kinds of harmful sounds, known for its potential to cause injury or physical impairment to listeners and live audiences. While Dick Higgins employs a more experimental avant-garde approach, proposing that the performer could also be harmed during the live performance of this music. But perhaps The most degenerate music is the one you have yet to hear yourself to understand. More deplorable than clinical noise horror. At the bottom of this thalassophobic carnival that is the latest internet iceberg fad, there exists something completely, unironically, irredeemable. Hello Kitty Suicide Club. A personal thank you goes to anyone who has supported the channel over the last couple of videos. This was something a little bit quirkier. We will return with our original content very soon. Thank you for all of the appreciation you have shown us here at Sets in the CD, and we can only hope that we continue to bring you stories from beyond the music.